In 1994, a bizarre anthem started filling the airwaves. It was a strange mix of folk, hip-hop, and a slide guitar that sounded like it was from another planet. The song was called Loser, and it became the anthem for a whole generation, and without a doubt, one of the most popular songs of the decade. But the kid who wrote it wasn't trying to define anyone, let alone himself. He was a bullied high school dropout, sometimes homeless, who thought his own song was a complete failure. Let's talk about the story of how he accidentally wrote a hit that would change music forever. Before we get started with today's video, if you guys want to support my channel, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And I've been told from a lot of my subscribers that they find themselves unsubscribed from my channel, or they don't see my new videos pop up, so make sure you turn on all notifications. Before Loser changed everything, the world of music was on the brink of a major shift. The polished sounds of 80s hair metal were fading out, and that created a vacuum. Into that void stepped grunge with Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit in 1991, really kicking things off. It was raw, authentic, and an angry sound. But alongside it, something else was brewing, something weirder and harder to define. And at the center of that was a young man named Beck David Campbell. The story of Beck begins in Los Angeles, where he was born on July 8th, 1970. His childhood was steeped in art as well as music. His dad, David Campbell, was a bluegrass musician and a well-known string arranger. His mother, Baby Hansen, was an artist, an actress, and a former Andy Warhol superstar who was deep in the avant-garde art world. Her father, Al Hansen, was a pioneer in the experimental Fluxus art movement, a scene that treated art as a spontaneous, often chaotic event instead of some precious object. This environment, obviously, as you can imagine, had a huge impact on Beck's worldview. His home wasn't some quiet suburban house. It was a revolving door for artists, musicians, and punk scene regulars. After his parents divorced when he was a teen, Beck and his brother were often left to fend for themselves in this creative chaos. For Beck, there was no line between art and life. It was all a collage. This upbringing fostered a fierce creativity, but it also made him an outsider in the American school system. As he put it, there were no punks or freaks in the schools he attended, and he'd often butt heads with the jocks. Beck, as a kid, moved between LA and Kansas, where he stayed with his grandfather, a Presbyterian minister, whose church music left an impression on him. He also spent some time in Europe living with his maternal grandfather. When he was 12, he moved back in with his mother in LA, just as the hardcore punk scene was exploding. His mom often gave shelter to young punks who had nowhere else to go, and even Darby Crash of the Germs slept on their couch more than once. Looking back, Beck admitted that punk felt like the most exciting music he had ever heard in years. Thanks to a friend who he was hanging with one day, Beck came across a copy of an unopened 1960s-era Mississippi John Hurt record. He took it home and never returned it, telling Spin, "I love the droning sound, the open tunings, the spare beat-down tone." And his voice was so full. He just went through so much and it comes across really, really amazing. This was the catalyst that got Beck into wanting to create his own music. Utilizing a guitar that was basically collecting dust at his mother's house, he dropped out of school around grade 9. With school behind him, he spent his days playing guitar, along to tunes by Charlie Patton and Blind Willie Johnson records. Despite enjoying music, he was deathly shy to perform live. So to get over this fear, he'd go to a nearby soccer field near his home in a neighborhood called Little El Salvador. He played music for the soccer players who really didn't pay attention to him, but it helped him get over this fear. As a teenager, Beck treated the buses of Los Angeles like his classroom and stage. He'd ride the Vermont line through South Central and back to Hollywood, sliding out Fred McDowell riffs on his guitar and rewriting old blues lyrics to fit the world that he saw rolling past. Sometimes a stranger with an instrument would drift to the back of the bus and join in, but more often than not, he just got sneers, insults, or silence. It was around the age of 16 or 17, he started making tapes by bouncing recordings back and forth between cassette players, layering over himself until the audio was warped and blown out. The shifting tape speeds often twisted his voice into a squeaky helium-like pitch, a strange effect he grew to love. He was also immersing himself in underground records, gravitating towards the noise and chaos of bands like Sonic Youth, and he was also getting into hip-hop as well. It was by 1989 he headed to New York with a girlfriend and $8 in his pocket. Shortly after arriving in the Big Apple, that girlfriend left him, and he was basically stranded on the Lower East Side. He drifted between friends' couches and anarchist squats, basically scraping by with any odd jobs he could get. He shot ID photos at a YMCA on the Upper East Side. He worked coat check at an East Village bookstore and did whatever else he could to make ends meet. Beck was drawn to the Lower East Side's anti-folk scene. It was a movement born in rebellion against polished commercial folk singers. Centered around venues like the Sidewalk Cafe and the Chameleon, the anti-folk scene was raw, ironic, but had a punk spirit. He became acquainted with musicians who sang about potato chips and exploding TV sets, including John S. Hall from the group King Missile. It was a perfect fit for a kid who grew up in the Fluxus art world. Beck was soon playing 4 to 5 shows a week at the bar The Chameleon, recalling to the Chicago Tribune, "So I wrote a song about a train rolling through the country destroying everybody, and I'd play a talking blues and make stuff up about what me and my friends did that day." He'd usually have 5 to 10 people show up, and they would simply laugh at him and refer to him as an idiot. After a year in New York City, the scene grew sick of him, and he also wasn't a fan of the weather, so he headed out back west to LA by 1990. Defeated but not broken, he worked a series of dead-end jobs, including alphabetizing the adult section in a video store, and he also moved refrigerators and furniture, and even worked as a hot dog man at children's birthday parties, and just kept playing in local coffee houses and clubs including Al's Bar, Raji's, and Jabberjaw. His performances were often a desperate attempt to grab the attention of a chattering and disinterested audience. He once again made up bizarre songs on the spot like he did in New York, just to see if anyone was paying attention. He remarked, "I would always sing my goofy stuff because everybody was drunk and I'd only have 2 minutes. That was my whole shot." Sometimes at shows, he would even wear a Star Wars stormtrooper mask, something that can be best described as performance art. It was in these noisy rooms playing for virtually no one that the DNA of his breakthrough was being born. He was a folk singer with a punk attitude, a bluesman with a hip-hop sensibility. But to the world, and often to himself, he just felt like a loser. He even started covering rapper Ice Cube in concert, telling Spin, "I started thinking that somehow the hip-hop and the folk thing could work together. I love playing straight old folk songs, but in rock clubs, the environment doesn't really connect with that music." Other bands were doing noise stuff, experimental stuff, jazz and hip-hop, and all that started filtering into what I was doing. That's when a guy named Tom Rothrock, who was the co-founder of an indie label named Bongload Records, took notice. Rothrock saw something unique in Beck's mix of folk, blues, as well as hip-hop and his surreal lyrics. Rothrock introduced the musician to a producer named Carl Stevenson. Stevenson was a hip-hop producer, and he had worked with artists on the Rap-A-Let Records label. His world was all about breakbeats and samples. So one afternoon in January of 1992, Beck went over to Stevenson's house, which was basically a home studio in his kitchen. There was no big plan, no major label budget, just a few hours to experiment. What happened over the next 6 hours was pure creative gold. Beck played the producer some of his music, and while the producer liked what he heard, he wasn't impressed with Beck's rapping. Stevenson started by making a beat. He sampled a cover of Dr. John's "I Walk on Gilded Splinters" by an artist named Johnny Jenkins. He created a heavy, hypnotic drum loop. Beck picked up his acoustic guitar and played a simple slide riff over it. Stevenson then looped that riff, creating the song's iconic droning foundation. Then the producer added a sitar line, another layer to the sonic collage. With this strange instrumental laid out, it was Beck's turn. He wanted to rap like Chuck D from Public Enemy. Beck loved the way Chuck D pronounced things, comparing him to a preacher. So he launched into a stream of consciousness flow, pulling rhymes from notebooks that he had carried with him. In the time of chimpanzees, I was a monkey. Butane in my veins and a mouth to cut the... The lyrics were nonsensical, a jumble of words that felt more like abstract poetry. When they played the vocal take back, Beck was mortified, listening to his own laid-back voice, trying to sound like one of hip-hop's most commencing MCs. He felt like a total failure. In a moment of self-deprecation, he leaned into the microphone and just said what he was thinking. "Man, I'm the worst rapper in the world. I'm just a loser." Then he sang it. He sang "I'm a loser" in the Spanish that he grew up hearing around LA. And then the line that would echo throughout the decade. "I'm a loser, baby, so why don't you kill me?" The line wasn't a cry for help or some angsty generational statement. It was a joke. It was just a musician laughing at himself and his own perceived lack of talent in the moment. They finished the track and Beck largely forgot about it. He didn't even have his own copy. To him, it was just a weird thing that he'd done one afternoon. He had no idea that he had just recorded the song that would define his career and make him the representative of a generation of slackers. While a bulk of the song was done in 6 hours, a few overdubs were added a few months later. Beck, interestingly enough, claimed to have had the idea for Loser as far back as the 80s, admitting, "I don't think I would have been able to go in and do Loser in a 6-hour shot without having been somewhat prepared. It was accidental, but it was something that I'd been working toward for a long time." For nearly a year and a half, the recording just sat on the shelf. In the meantime, Beck released other stuff, including the song titled "MTV Makes Me Want to Smoke Crack." But finally, in March of 1993, Bong Load Custom Records decided to press a small 500-copy run of Loser. It wasn't a major release, it was just a tiny splash in the ocean of the music industry. Beck told Rolling Stone how things were looking pretty grim for him at the time, admitting, "I was living in a shed behind a house with a bunch of rats next to an alley downtown. I had zero money and zero possibilities. I was working in a video store for minimum wage." But the single landed in the right hands. The song started making inroads in the Los Angeles area. A copy made its way to KXLU, a college radio station in Los Angeles, which gave the song its first airplay. From there, it jumped to the influential Santa Monica radio station KCRW. But the real explosion happened when another LA radio giant, K-Rock, got a hold of it. K-Rock was a kingmaker in the alternative scene, and when they put Loser in heavy rotation, the song just went nuclear. The station's phone lines lit up. Listeners couldn't get enough of the song's bizarre mix of slide guitar, hip-hop beats, and self-deprecating lyrics. The initial 500 copies sold out instantly. Bong Load couldn't keep up with the demand. The song soon spread from LA to across the country, passed from one alternative station to another, driven purely by listener obsession. The attention brought Beck bookings at local LA clubs, and he was soon profiled by local California publications, including the LA Times, LA Weekly, and Bay Area Magazine. Soon enough, Seattle station KNDD was playing the song, and stations in New York City were begging for copies of the single, but Bong Load had run out. The stations that were playing the song were spinning it upwards of 24 times a day, so once an hour. Suddenly, the struggling kid from the coffee shops was at the center of a massive major label bidding war. Executives who wouldn't have given him the time of day a month earlier were now desperately trying to sign Beck. It was a surreal and bewildering experience for Beck, who was still working a low-wage job. Given his background, he was deeply suspicious of the corporate music machine, having built his identity on being an anti-commercial artist. Tony Berg, who had been working in the A&R department for Geffen Records, was friends with Tom Rothrock, the head of Bong Load Records. Berg told Blender, "I just lost my mind when I heard it. He left my office, and I swear by the time he got home, I had left a message asking him to introduce me to Beck." Around Thanksgiving in 1993, Beck was the subject of a bidding war between Geffen Records, Warner Brothers, and Capitol Records. He even got a phone call from David Geffen himself. Beck admitted to the Montreal Gazette in 1994 that he thought it was ridiculous that people who hadn't really established themselves in their careers would sign to a major label. So he signed with Geffen Records. Now, I do want to point out that Geffen put him on their subsidiary DGC Records, which Nirvana was also signed to. But the deal he signed gave him an enormous amount of creative freedom. He could put out anything he wanted to, he could record with anyone he wanted, and he could release albums on indie labels. He told the Gazette, "The song was already on commercial radio, and I really don't have any control over it anymore. So with a major label, I thought that it might give more people a chance to hear the whole album and put Loser more in context with my other stuff." In January of 94, DGC officially re-released Loser with the full force of a major label behind it. The song was unstoppable. It rocketed up the charts, peaking at number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 by April of 94. The song also topped the alternative airplay chart in the States and peaked at number 39 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. The music video, meanwhile, was a masterpiece of low-budget psychedelia and was directed by his friend Steve Hanft. It premiered on MTV on the program 120 Minutes on January 30th, 1994.
Right now we're going to kick off things with a world premiere of a song that I'm sure you have heard by now. It's burning up possibly every chart that it is on, and it is from a singer-songwriter out of Los Angeles named Beck, and it is for a song called Loser. And you knew this song was going to be absolutely huge because everybody in the world, including myself, loves those slacker anthems, those tales of self-deprecation and self-loathing. Morrissey basically made a career out of those songs, and Radiohead had a gold album last year with Creep, and this is going to follow suit. His debut album is called Mellow Gold. It doesn't come out until March, though, so in the meantime, check out his debut video and song, Loser, from Beck on MTV. 120 minutes.
Shortly afterwards, the song ended up in MTV's Buzzbin, and after that, it was soon put into heavy rotation on the network. He was everywhere, and he was miserable.
Falling on a termite, who's choking on the splinters.
The media immediately branded Loser a slacker anthem, the voice for a cynical and disaffected Generation X. Beck, who saw himself as a hardworking musician steeped in folk and blues, hated the label. He told The Guardian, "That sort of slacker idea or the goofy hip-hop guy, I just think it's silly. It's not me." He added to Spin, "I've always tried to get money to eat and pay for my rent. It's always been real hard for me. I've never had the money or time to slack." Beck felt completely misunderstood. The song that was making him a star was also trapping him in a persona that he didn't create or believe in. The fear of becoming a one-hit wonder was immense. Some critics dismissed him as a novelty act, a joke that would soon wear thin. Beck reacted against the fame, often performing deliberately difficult versions of Loser in concert, or sometimes even just playing the song from a boombox on stage while he danced around. He told Spin, "All happening to me now is totally insane, because if you ask anybody who knows me, they tell you I've had the worst. This is an avalanche of confetti and balloons and kazoos. Before, the party was just an empty room with a bare light bulb on the ceiling. It was pretty bleak." He added that he never watched MTV, admitting, "I was blissfully ignorant. If you told me a year ago I was going to have a record deal, I would have laughed at you." The self-mocking attitude that's so prevalent in Loser wasn't anything new. The song draws from a long history of artists turning failure into anthems, starting as far back as the Beatles' 1964 track, "I'm a Loser," running through the Stooges' "I Want to Be Your Dog," and resurfacing in Sebadoh's Losercore. Even Sub Pop Records nodded to the identity by stamping Loser in bold type across t-shirts as far back as 1988. Beck was also part of a rock underground subculture like Sebadoh, Ween, and Pavement, which were built around crude 4-track recordings. Beck, when speaking to the Chicago Tribune, gave a shout out to Ween for inspiring him, adding, "It was really affirming when Ween came out, because when I started playing music, that's what we did. We pass tapes around. The whole concept of a 4-track removes the recording studio and all the cost involved with that. So just goofing off can become music." Beck added that he hated the whole idea of a rock star, saying, "I think it's something to be made fun of." By March of 1994, DGC issued Beck's major label debut, Mellow Gold. Drawing from styles such as rock, hip-hop, folk, blues, psychedelia, and country, the album also stood out for its sharp, ironic, and witty lyrics. Despite carrying an anti-commercial edge, it became an unexpected hit, climbing to number 13 on the US charts, and later earning platinum certification. By mid-2008, Mellow Gold had sold more than 1.2 million copies in the US. Beck reflected back on the album, admitting, "The whole concept of Mellow Gold is that it's like a satanic K-Tel record that's been found in a trash dumpster." The fear of being a one-hit wonder was very real. Beck himself remembered veterans in the business telling him that he should go back to school, that his songs were just a hodgepodge of ideas, and that he wouldn't last. The pressure got so intense that when Weird Al asked for permission to parody Loser as Schmoozer, Beck said no, a decision he later deeply regretted, explaining he was just afraid of being not taken seriously. Beck was convinced that his whole career was a fluke that was about to burst. He even admitted that he turned down an opportunity for Loser to appear as a theme song in the Jim Carrey movie Dumb and Dumber. He recalled, "I remember getting a phone call one day. My manager said there's a film. They want to use Loser as a theme song." There was a long pause and he said the name of the film is Dumb and Dumber. And I just remember, that sums up what the world thinks of me at this point. I tried to have fun with it, tried not to take it too serious, but at the same time, it was a little disheartening sometimes. To prove to himself and the world that he was more than one song, Beck dove back into his indie roots, even as Loser was all over the charts. In 1994, the same year as his major label debut Mellow Gold was released, he put out 2 other albums as indie releases, Stereopathetic Soul Manure and One Foot in the Grave. Those records were his way of staying connected to his experimental spirit that had always driven him. Today, Loser stands as more than just a hit song. It's a cultural artifact, a perfect snapshot of the early 90s. It captured the ironic detachment and the genre mashing that defined the decade. It was a song born from failure that became a massive success, an inside joke that became an anthem for millions, and the kid who felt like an outcast had accidentally written the soundtrack for a generation of outsiders. The ultimate irony is that by embracing the label of a loser as a joke, Beck transcended it completely. The song was a gateway, the happy accident that allowed him to build a long and celebrated career. It's a testament to the idea that sometimes the best art doesn't come from grand statements, but from these spontaneous, messy, and imperfect moments of just messing around. It proved that a musician armed with a cheap guitar and a head full of rhymes could change the world with a song he thought was a failure. That brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you have suggestions for future topics, let me know in the comments section below, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll Tree Stories. Take care.